Our family business was a small bakery I had built with my own hands back in the 90s. Now, it wasn't me but my son Jack who officially ran things, with his wife Sarah keeping the books. It all seemed natural. The young one should lead, while I stayed close as an advisor. But from the very beginning, I sensed something was wrong. Profits falling, customers disappearing, while Jack suddenly showed off expensive gadgets and a new watch you couldn't buy on our modest wages. That morning, I went down to the basement to check on flour supplies, but I heard footsteps that froze behind the office storage door. My heart beat faster. No one was supposed to be there but me. I pressed my ear closer and caught Sarah's whisper. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." "Yes, we'll move the money today." It took me a full minute not to barge in right then. Why did I keep quiet? Give me a moment, I'll explain. I walked back upstairs, pretending I hadn't heard a thing, though inside me something boiled. Jack sat in the front room, pretending to read the paper, but his eyes kept sliding to his phone. I tried to spark a normal conversation. "Son, how's that school order going? Heard they cut back on the loaves again." "It's fine, Dad," he muttered without looking up. "Kids don't eat bread the way they used to." I noticed his jaw tighten. I had seen that tell hundreds of times when he lied as a teenager. That evening, I opened the books. Sarah always locked them in the safe, but her purse was left carelessly on the chair, and the key was inside. For the first time in half a year, I looked at the reports. Black and white, expenses doubled, income shrunk. Strange transfers masked as equipment purchases. I realized who I had underestimated, but I stayed silent. The next morning, I called Sarah into the kitchen, pretending I needed a hand. She walked in smiling, hands dusted in flour, like everything was normal. I asked her quietly, "Are you sure our business is doing well?" Her eyes flinched for half a second, then she hid it behind a laugh. "Of course, Mr. Optimist. It's just the market. Don't worry, we've got everything under control." Too easy, too casual. I knew there was no control at all. Why didn't I expose her right there? Because if I made a sudden move, they'd cover their tracks deeper. I needed time to see how wide this betrayal ran. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my name, my work, my legacy. If Jack was truly part of this, then it was a betrayal I could never forgive. And then came the phrase after which there was no turning back. Sarah's phone lit up with an incoming call labeled "Partner." She grabbed it, stepped outside, and didn't even say goodbye. I made a decision that would split our month in half. The second week started with rain that refused to stop. The bakery's front windows fogged over, the air heavy with damp yeast, and customers came in fewer numbers. Jack said it was the weather, but I already knew better. By now I had proof of numbers being doctored, whispered calls to a partner, and a delivery man brave enough to tip me off. What I lacked was the final link, the why. Every betrayal carries a reason, and I had to find theirs. I spent the early mornings at my usual spot in the corner, hands wrapped around coffee, pretending to read the newspaper. It gave me the vantage point to watch them both. Sarah often came in early, hair tied back, tapping furiously on her phone before anyone else walked through the door. Jack tried to act relaxed, whistling as he set trays in the display, but his eyes followed her. Not with affection, with fear. That detail mattered. Fear meant someone was pulling strings. By Wednesday of that week, I decided it was time to step out of the shadows. I drove to the edge of town, to a small bar where the truck drivers usually gathered. The same man who had warned me, Eddie, was there, hunched over a beer at noon. I slid onto the stool beside him. "You didn't hear it from me, Mr. H," he muttered before I even asked. "But the word is, Sarah's been moving product. Flour orders are fake, sure, but the shipments aren't going where you think." "Where then?" I pressed. Eddie scratched at his beard. A warehouse near the river. Not bread supplies. Something bigger. Folks say gambling money's washing through there. I let that sink in. Gambling. Money laundering. Not just my bakery's survival, but my name tied to dirty cash. Here I made my second mistake, though I didn't know it yet. I asked Eddie for directions. That single question would come back to haunt me. The next night, I drove down to the river. The warehouse was plain, no signs, but the sight chilled me. My bakery's delivery van parked outside. I crouched near the shadows, listening. Men unloaded boxes, heavy ones, not flour sacks. I caught glimpses of labels. Liquor, cigarettes, things never on our books. And there, laughing with one of the men, was Sarah. She wore no bakery apron, just a leather jacket, hair loose. Not the woman I saw dusted with flour in the mornings. This was someone else entirely. I understood then. Jack wasn't the leader. Sarah was. And he was trapped in it as much as I was. I should have walked away quietly, but I stayed, and that's when a door banged open. Jack stumbled out, arguing with Sarah. You promised it was just temporary. Just until the loans were cleared. Her voice cut sharp. Don't be naive. This is bigger than bread. We're not going back. He rubbed his face, defeated, and she stepped closer, pressing a hand to his chest. If your father asks questions, you shut him down. He can't know. That was the moment I knew two things at once. Jack wasn't innocent, but he wasn't steering the ship either. And Sarah? Sarah had turned my family's work into a front for crime. Why didn't I confront them right there? Because I realized a harder truth. If I went to the police, my bakery would be finished. Our name dragged through mud, my grandson mocked in school, everything I built gone overnight. Justice would mean ashes. And so came the moral dilemma. Protect the family's reputation or burn it all down for the truth. The next morning, I tested Jack with a small push. Over breakfast, just the two of us, I set my coffee down and asked, Son, if something were wrong in this place, would you tell me? He froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. His eyes flicked once toward the office, where Sarah was on the phone. He swallowed slowly and said, Nothing's wrong, Dad. You worry too much. But his voice cracked. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I realized then I had to choose, save him by breaking her, or save the business by sacrificing him. There was no clean way out. By the end of that week, I had a plan. I would set a trap, not for Jack, but for Sarah and her partner. If I could expose her dealings without tying the bakery directly, maybe I could salvage both my son and our name. To do that, I needed bait. And bait required me to play along, just long enough to earn her trust. That Friday night, when Sarah left her phone on the counter, I memorized the number labeled partner. One call, one wrong word, and everything could collapse. But I was ready to risk it. I had heard a phrase that sealed my direction. We're not going back. She was right. There was no going back. Only forward, into the fire. I made my choice. Now I just had to live with it. The third week began with a silence that felt heavier than the rain before. Sarah moved around the bakery with sharp efficiency, never meeting my eyes. Jack avoided me outright, slipping out on errands that made less and less sense. Bank run, supplier call, meeting with the school board. Always somewhere else, never here, never with me. I had the number from Sarah's phone, and I had memorized the sound of Jack's breaking voice. Now it was time to press forward. On Monday evening, I stepped into the office when the bakery was closed. The air still smelled of cinnamon and yeast, but the computer's glow made the room colder. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. 3 rings, then a deep male voice. Yeah. I hesitated only a breath, then said, "This is about the bakery. We need to talk." There was silence, then a low laugh. "So the old man's finally in the loop. Good. Saves me the trouble." The line went dead before I could respond. My fingers shook, though not from fear, from anger. He knew me. He had expected me. That meant Sarah had already spoken of me. The next morning, I confronted her for the first time. We stood in the kitchen, dough rising on the counter, the smell of coffee filling the room. "Sarah," I said quietly, "who's your partner?" She looked up sharply, flour streaked across her cheek, but her hands never stopped kneading. "Partner? You mean the flour supplier? Don't play with me." I called him. He knew my name. For the first time, she froze mid-motion. Her jaw tightened, eyes flicked to the door, as though measuring the distance. Then she smiled, calm and cold. "You should have stayed out of this." That was the first honest thing she had said to me in weeks. Here I admit it, I made a mistake. Instead of pushing further, I waited. I wanted Jack to walk into the room, to hear her. But waiting gave her time to compose herself, to turn it into a lie by the time he did appear. Jack stepped in, carrying flour sacks, and Sarah's voice shifted instantly. "Your father's worried again. Thinks we're hiding something." Jack's eyes darted from her to me, guilt plain in them. "Dad, please, you've got to trust us." Trust. That word burned. That night, I decided to confront Jack alone. I found him smoking in the back alley, a habit he swore he'd quit years ago. His hands trembled with the lighter. "Son," I said, stepping closer, "I saw the warehouse. I know about the shipments." His shoulders slumped, like a weight pressing him down. He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. He just whispered, "I didn't want this." She said it was just until we cleared the loans. Then it kept going. "I'm in too deep, Dad." "Then why not walk away?" His laugh was hollow. "You don't walk away from people like them. You just survive." And there it was. The secret. Not gambling, not laundering, but them. Whoever they were, Sarah wasn't just dabbling. She was connected to men who didn't let people leave. I realized in that moment, Jack wasn't my enemy. He was my liability. If I protected him blindly, they would take everything from us. If I sacrificed him, maybe I could save the business. That was the real choice in front of me. I asked him one last question. "If it comes to it, will you stand against her?" He stared at the ground for a long time before answering. "I don't know if I can." Those words cut deeper than any lie. My own son, paralyzed, unable to choose between blood and fear. By midweek, the trap had already started to close. The partner called the bakery's landline. His voice was smooth, too calm. "Tomorrow night. Warehouse. You come, or your son answers for you." That was no request. It was an order. I hung up without a word. My hands were steady now. The anger had cooled into something sharper. This was no longer about suspicion or whispers. This was war inside my own family, and the first shots had already been fired. That evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. I thought of the years I spent building this bakery, the mornings before dawn, the cracked hands, the smell of bread that once meant home. And now it was nothing but a shield for criminals. I knew then I would not go to the police. Not yet. I would walk into that warehouse myself. Because only by standing there, face to face, would I see the true enemy. I pushed back from the table and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow night it ends." I accepted the cost before I even knew the price. That night the river smelled like rain and old motors, a metallic taste in the air that made my mouth dry. I drove alone, headlights cutting a pale path toward the warehouse, my hands on the wheel the way they had been on mixing paddles and oven handles for 40 years. Steady, minimum flourish. I had told myself for days I would do this quietly, collect proof, and walk away with my name intact. Then Eddie texted me, "I can bring a camera." "You sure?" I was sure enough to answer, "Bring it." I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, shoes scraping gravel, breath fogging. The bakery van was there, half in shadow, like a promise that once you park under that roof, you don't necessarily leave the same. My plan was simple and brutal in its own way. Get inside the meeting, listen, record, and leave before anyone knew I'd been there. I would hand the file to someone I trusted, not the police first, not yet, someone who could make it public without burning us outright. I should have guessed Sarah would expect me. She was never sloppy when the stakes were highest. But I did not expect the complacency of other people's violence. How much it depends on surprise. I slipped through a side door after Eddie gave me the nod from the alley, camera taped to his chest, a cheap recorder in my jacket pocket. Inside, the warehouse smelled of cardboard and cheap whiskey. There were 3 men I'd never met before, big in the way men become big when they're trying to look important. Marco, the partner, sat talking numbers like he was reading the obituaries. Flat, certain, final. Sarah stood beside him, hands folded, a look of someone who'd folded herself into someone else's plan and found it warmer than her own skin. "You came," Marco said when I stepped closer. His voice didn't surprise me. The recorder did its small, faithful work. "I won out," I said, voice steady. I kept my hands visible. Old habits, and also a small courtesy to myself. "Out?" Marco's mouth twisted. "You're public now. That's not how this works." Sarah's head snapped to me. For a second her face was nothing but a warning, the quiet before an alarm. "He's my father," she said. "He doesn't know." Jack appeared from the shadows, and my heart sank a notch because I'd hoped he wouldn't come. He came anyway, hands empty, eyes raw. "I told you to stay away," he said to me, and I heard shame and pleading tangled together. I had 1 card left, the small recorder in my pocket. In the office I had heard enough to know Marco's pattern, the shipments, the cover accounts. I stepped closer and let the recorder hang free near my chest. "What do you want from us?" I asked Marco calmly. "Money? Control? Or just a cut of my name?" He laughed like a man who'd heard every confession and found it amusing. "Respect," he said. "Your name gives us a front. People trust bread. They don't ask questions about cartons. You keep baking, you keep the lights on, and we move things. You get paid. Everyone's happy." That was the verdict. Respect, and the illusion of safety. He named numbers, dates, the men who'd pick up shipments under the guise of our deliveries. He mentioned a lawyer who'd clean the records for a fee. He used words like "we" and "protect" and "risk" with the casualness of someone signing for a package. I could have left then, file in my hand, but pride is a sticky thing. I wanted them to see what I'd done. I wanted Jack to see. "You think I'll live with this?" I asked. My voice had a steady edge, and maybe that's what made him smile before he reached for me. The first hand came fast, a shove meant to humiliate. Eddie's camera clicked on like a small, mechanical witness. The second blow was meant for me, but caught Jack instead. He moved strangely, not away from me but between me and Marco's man, and for the first time in weeks I saw the boy who used to stand on the loading dock and help me stack crates. He fought, clumsy but furious. Noise exploded, a scuffle, curses, a lamp smashed. I ducked, my shoulder slammed into a stack of boxes, the air filled with dust, and a sound like a slab of dough being slapped. No one was killed. No one should be. But there was a kind of damage that leaves marks you can't file under. Repair. A bruise on Jack's cheek, a cut on my hand that bled steady and red. The camera kept rolling. When it ended, they left as men who think they have the upper hand, stepping out into the night with a swagger that tries to pretend nothing happened. Marco's last words were a threat wrapped in a smile. "Tell your son to behave, old man. Or next time, he won't be so lucky." We stumbled back to the car. Eddie had taken what he could. The recorders sang with their voices, admissions, deals, dates. It was more than I'd hoped for. It hurt to hear Sarah's tone when she spoke of the bakery as though it were a ledger and not a living thing. It hurt worse to see Jack's face, full of regret, full of the kind of knowledge that asks you to choose. That night I made a decision I hadn't been willing to make before. I would make this public, but in a way that minimized the fallout for the bakery. I would hand the recordings to a woman I trusted at the morning paper, a reporter who knew how to tell the ugly truth without burning the town to the ground. She could expose Marco and his ring, pin the evidence to him, and leave a thread that might protect Jack if he cooperated. It was imperfect, maybe immoral in some eyes, but it was a choice toward the lesser ruin. Jack sat with me in the diner at dawn, hands wrapped around coffee that didn't quite warm him. He didn't speak for a long time. "I can help," he finally said. "I'll tell them everything. I'm done hiding." I searched his face, for weakness, for courage, and found both. I saw the son who had been scared, and the man who was finally starting to choose. One loop closed that night, Jack's decision. He would stand with me, or at least stand where his shame could be used for something else. We left the diner before the paper put ink to pulp. I walked away from the paper's office with a weight in my pocket and a strange lightness in my chest. The battle had started, and the counterpunch had been thrown. But battles have a way of making collateral of the innocent, and I knew we'd only bought ourselves a clearer enemy in Marco. By the final week, the bakery no longer smelled of bread. It smelled of waiting, like the air before a thunderstorm. Every customer who walked in looked at me differently, as though they sensed something sour beneath the flour and sugar. Jack stayed close to me now, not to Sarah. He kept his sleeves rolled, arms dusted with dough, as if hard work might erase the guilt clinging to him. But Sarah? She hardly came in at all. The article hit on a Wednesday. I woke before dawn, bought 3 copies of the morning paper, and read every word twice. Marco's name was there, buried among details of a smuggling operation on the river. "Unnamed local business" was the phrase that described us. It was careful, almost protective, but I knew anyone with eyes could connect the dots if they wanted to. By noon, Marco had called. His voice had lost its calm. It was a hiss of fury through the line. "You think this saves you? You think paper keeps you safe? You're finished." Then silence. Jack was in the kitchen when I hung up. He didn't ask who it was. He already knew. He only said, "What now?" And that was the hardest question. Because justice on paper is one thing, but justice on the street is another. That evening, Sarah came home. She stood in the doorway of the bakery office, eyes rimmed red but mouth still set like steel. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. "Marco won't stop. Not for you. Not for me." I asked her quietly, "And you? Will you stop?" Her silence was the truest answer she had ever given me. The next day, the storm broke. 2 men came in during the late afternoon rush, strangers, pretending to be customers. They bought nothing. They left a folded note on the counter. "Midnight. Warehouse. Bring the tapes." I could have called the police then. Could have handed everything over and washed my hands. But that would have left Jack exposed, Sarah exposed, maybe even the bakery's name torn down in court filings. My whole life judged by men who never woke before dawn to knead dough. So I went. alone. The warehouse was empty except for Marco, leaning against a crate, a pistol lying on the box like an extra hand. "You're braver than I thought," he said. "Or older," I replied. "At my age, fear runs thin." We stood there, two men too stubborn to blink first. I laid the recorder on the crate. Not the real one. Eddie had made a copy. This was bait. "Take it," I told him, "and leave my family out of it." He studied me for a long moment. Then he reached for it. That was when Jack burst in. He hadn't listened when I told him to stay away. He saw the gun, saw me standing still, and his voice broke. "Don't touch him." The scene cracked open like glass under pressure. Marco swung the pistol toward Jack. I stepped between them without thinking, old bones faster than they had any right to be. My hand hit the weapon aside, it clattered to the floor, and Jack lunged, tackling Marco against the crates. It was messy, graceless, but in the end, we stood while he didn't. Eddie, waiting outside, called it in. The police came quick, too quick, which told me someone at the paper had tipped them off. They arrested Marco, took the weapon, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed without tasting iron. But victory never comes clean. Sarah disappeared that night. She left no note, no suitcase, not even a trace in the accounts. Just gone. The officers asked questions, but I gave no answers. Maybe she ran from Marco's people. Maybe she ran from us. Either way, she chose her side. And Jack? He stayed. He cleaned the ovens, stacked the shelves, opened the door at dawn with flour still on his shirt. But I saw it in his eyes, the knowledge that part of him had helped bring the rot inside. That doesn't wash off, no matter how much you scrub. By the end of the month, the bakery smelled like bread again. Customers returned, though they looked at us differently, as if measuring the story behind each loaf. We survived, but survival has its own cost. Sometimes, late at night, I sit alone in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator steady, and I ask myself, did I save my family, or just preserve the shell of what we once were? The truth is simple. Betrayal never leaves clean edges. It cuts, it scars, and then it waits. And here's the thought I leave you with. Revenge doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it tastes like bread pulled from the oven too soon, heavy in the middle, hollow where it should be whole. Now, if you want more stories the family never wrote down, stay close. I'll be back.